Hello everyone, it's Linda here from Just for Tummies and welcome to our video today. And it's all about, with it being IBS Awareness Month, I thought we'd talk to Sophia, nutritional therapist Sophia Hill, all about IBS, which stands for Irritable Bowel Syndrome, of course, and SIBO, which stands for Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth. And sometimes people are diagnosed with IBS when in actual fact they have got SIBO. So it can cause a lot of confusion. Now, the two subjects are huge and we've only got about 45 minutes today, but we'll cover as much as we can. And if those of you who are watching this video live have any questions, then just post your question below the video and we will get back to you. So I'm going to invite Sophia into the video. Oh, and by the way, if you want to share this video afterwards, please do so. It will remain on the Just for Tummies Facebook page, and we will be sending it out in a newsletter in about a week or 10 days. Okay, right, let's get Sophia onto the video. Hi there, Sophia.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Are you?
Yes, not bad, although I've got a bit of a gruff voice. I've had a bit of a nasty cold last week, so if I sound a bit hoarse, that is why. But I should be able to power through for 45 minutes
without losing it.
Yeah, it's on its way out, the cold, but I've just been left with a bit of a, the things that these toddlers bring home, honestly.
Oh, I know. Well, I think I've spoken to you before, Sophia, about Jessie, my granddaughter, who's at nursery. And when she started nursery, she just brought every single virus home. I think we've got more antibodies against viruses than you can possibly imagine.
You hope so.
Well, I'm really glad I can hear you and I can see you, because I've had a new computer this weekend. I mean, I've got a laptop and I've got my iPad and my iPhone, but you know, when I'm working in the office, I like what I call my big girl's computer, my desktop PC.
Same.
And I wore my previous one out, so I've got a new one that's been installed this weekend. So you know how you have to upload everything and then make sure it works. So anyway. Let's get cracking.
Yes.
So so as it says, you know, we're talking about IBS and SIBO, and I know, Sophia, that you have a particular interest in both IBS and SIBO. So do you want to just explain quickly? I mean, and you're a nutritional therapist, so I know you're going to have an interest in these conditions, but you have a personal interest, don't you?
I do. I specialized or decided to specialize in that area because I've actually been through it myself. So I mean, I personally, now knowing what I know, link it back to lots of rounds of antibiotics that I had when I was a child. I had a lot of tonsillitis when I was a child, and I feel like I was just always taking that yellow penicillin liquid, which I can still remember the smell of to this day. And I feel like I can just remember so many cases of it. Anyway, fast forward a few years and I was really struggling with my gut health, was intolerant to lots of random different foods, would have really bad abdominal pain and bloating and the sort of classic IBS symptoms, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit. But I went to the doctor as it's normal, you know, I was having time off school and things because, you know, I was just not feeling great. And they were just like, you know, fobbing me off, saying, oh, it's just, you know, we don't really know. And then eventually we did get to a conclusion that it's IBS. And there was basically nothing you can do. You can take these certain medications which might help you, might not. And that's basically it. Just, you've got to live with it. There's nothing we can do.
How old were you then, Sophia?
I think I must have been maybe about 13 or 14 or something, I think it was. But yeah, there was just like, we don't know what causes it. There's nothing you can do. It's sort of lifelong. You'll just have to manage with it, kind of thing.
So they obviously didn't make the connection between the multiple courses of antibiotics that you had when you were a youngster, and just like today, nothing's changed very much, has it, Sophia?
No, it really hasn't. It's so annoying.
The medics are still not joining those dots together.
No. So my mum has already had a keen interest in nutrition, and I began, looking on the internet, buying books, reading things, and doing specific things with my diet. And that sparked an interest in the nutrition side. And that was one of the reasons why I did go to study nutrition at university, and then also do my diploma in nutritional therapy afterwards. And yeah, I just basically feel quite passionate that other people don't have to go through such a long-winded process of figuring out why, because some people still accept that, oh, I've just got IBS for life, there's nothing I can do about it, when 9 times out of 10 there actually is something you can do about it, and you don't have to live with
you can
it.
do about it to improve symptoms, and in some cases completely resolve symptoms.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's awful that people just can't access the right information and advice to help them.
It is, and I think if you do go online, there's so much conflicting information on there that people don't know where to start, they don't know where they stand, and it can be a minefield. So hopefully we can help to solve some of those queries today for people.
So you were never actually diagnosed with SIBO then, Sophia?
Well, I was, but through my own diagnosis. So I did a breath test on myself, and found out that I had got SIBO. So then it all joined together. I was like, that's what I've had all this time. What can I do about it? And then once I'd gone through my own SIBO protocols and everything, I then found that I didn't have those symptoms anymore. I was able to eat the foods I couldn't eat before, like dairy used to be really bad for me. I can now eat dairy fine. And I just don't have that horrible worry about what's going to happen with my gut today, like the sort of anxiety around it all. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I struggle with that now, but we'll talk about SIBO in a bit more detail, but it is something that you kind of have to keep on top of, so you don't slip back into it, because it does have a higher recurrence rate if you don't keep on top of things.
And it's the same with IBS, of course, because there's always going to be a sensitivity there in the gut, isn't there, that people have to be mindful of. Just a couple of stats here, Sophia. Yeah, right. We're on stats? Yes, here. Yeah, I did a bit of a Google. More than a third of people with IBS also have SIBO, and people with IBS are roughly 5 times more likely to have SIBO than those without.
Yeah.
So let's go on to IBS. So what is IBS and how is it diagnosed? Well, how is it diagnosed conventionally?
Yeah, so like what happened to me, there's not really a medical test to diagnose IBS. It's more based on the exclusion of other conditions, like they like to rule out inflammatory bowel disease, celiac. They will sometimes run a basic stool test to rule out any like gut infections, particularly if you've been traveling or something, recently when you go in. But really they're looking for excluding other conditions. And then they come to the conclusion that it's probably IBS, but they are also looking for symptoms. So they want to be seeing that you've got abdominal pain or cramping, bloating, a change in bowel habits, whether that's constipation or diarrhea.
And is that for 3 months or more?
Yeah, I think they actually say about 6 months.
6 months, yes.
Which
the stool tests that they do, they're not very comprehensive, are they? As opposed to private stool tests.
Yeah, they're literally
I'm just checking about parasites, parasitology tests, stool tests.
Yeah, they are the ones that the doctors run are very basic. So when they're looking for parasites, for example, they are only looking under the microscopes. So only if they see a live parasite crawling along, they say yes, it's positive. Whereas the private functional tests use PCR technology, so they can actually detect the DNA, because some parasites go into a dormant phase and they may not be seen crawling around under the microscope, but they're still there.
Yes.
But also they're only checking for a handful of bacteria and parasites on a GP test, whereas a functional stool test looks at a whole plethora of parasitology, bacteria and yeasts and everything. So you can't really compare the two at all, actually.
So that's one of the main differences then between with IBS and between conventional diagnosis and naturopathic diagnosis.
Yeah.
But of course, NHS, it's free, and
Mm,
private, people have to pay for the stool testing, consultation fees, and the
yeah,
supplements as well. So
yeah.
let's go on to SIBO then. So what is SIBO, and how is SIBO diagnosed?
So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's an overgrowth of bacteria in an area of the digestive system, the small intestine, which should be relatively sterile area.
Mm,
Um, that area is used for absorbing nutrients, and that's why it tends to be quite a sterile environment, so that the villi in there can uptake the nutrients. If it's
mm,
crowded out with bacteria, then the villi of the small intestine can't do that, and people can become very symptomatic in terms of the bloating and all the gas production and the pain and
mm,
etc.
mm,
Because the bacteria in the small intestine are then fermenting and putrefying the food that you do eat. So
mm.
that's where all this gas is coming from in terms of SIBO.
So
Um,
the bacteria then that's in the small intestine that shouldn't be there, how does
yeah,
it get there?
well, this is like when we come on to talk about sort of like the root causes, that's one of them, is like, well, how did the bacteria get there? So
Mm,
there's a few different routes how the bacteria can get there. If you think about routes of entry, so usually we have our stomach acid, which is there to kill off any bacteria. So if you've got well functioning stomach acid, then when the bacteria reaches the small, well, it shouldn't ever reach the small intestine because it should be killed off in the
yeah.
stomach by the stomach acid. If you've got low stomach acid, say you've been taking a PPI that suppresses your stomach acid,
Mm-hmm.
you're really exposed to getting something like SIBO because bacteria is entering your small intestine where it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But your body is clever, so it should and does usually have a mechanism in place, which is the migrating motor complex. And
Mm-hmm.
that sends sort of like an electrical impulse wave through your small intestine between meals. To sweep that area of bacteria and debris. So there is
Mm-hmm.
that second line defense. However, in the cases of SIBO, there's something that's often gone wrong with the migrating motor complex as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll come on to food poisoning in a minute, but food poisoning is one of them.
Yes.
One of the ways, endometriosis, abdominal surgeries, they can all actually damage the nerve cells in the migrating motor complex. So if you've got low stomach acid, the bacteria enters the small
Mm-hmm.
intestine, then the migrating motor complex isn't working to shift it through, so it sits and stagnates there, and then basically you've got the perfect picture for SIBO to
Mm-hmm.
occur.
I'm just thinking about people who also have celiac disease, Sophie,
Yeah,
and then they go on to develop SIBO. It must be awful for them. It's
yeah,
like a double whammy.
absolutely.
And of course,
Yeah,
as you know, I'm an ex-colon hydrotherapist. I carried out thousands and thousands of colonic treatments, and it was always my aim to ensure during a colonic treatment that the whole length of the large intestine, including the cecum, was cleared out. Because I know if there's an issue with the ileocecal valve, that
mm,
one-way valve between the last part of the small intestine and the first part of the large intestine, if that's not opening and closing properly, then
yeah,
bacteria from the large bowel can sort of get reverse and get back, move backwards into the small intestine.
100%. So there's the sort of going down approach, and then there's also, like you
Yeah.
say, going up. So if you've got a dysbiotic gut microbiome and the ileocecal valve isn't working properly, then that bacteria can translocate into the small intestine and
Mm.
be in the place where it shouldn't be. And again, if the migrating motor complex isn't pushing it through effectively, then you can develop SIBO again.
So it's very
But
important to avoid constipation, of course.
absolutely it is, yeah. And just being aware of the risk factors, and if you have been exposed to any of them, then trying to take action to prevent the further damage, which can then result in SIBO
Mm.
later down the
So
line.
if you've been exposed to lots of antibiotics, and when I say lots, multiple courses, I suppose I'm thinking, maybe 3 courses of antibiotics in quite a short space of time.
Yeah.
And if as a child like you were
Mm,
exposed to lots of antibiotics, and that potential damage to the gut has not been rectified, and then people who are taking proton pump inhibitors regularly, for long periods of time, and of course
mm,
poisoning as well. Would you say that they were the three main risk factors in developing, well, both IBS and SIBO?
Yes, although there are quite a few more which we can definitely come on to. But yeah, antibiotics, massive, low stomach acid,
Yeah.
huge food poisoning. But there are other ones that can creep in and some ones that are unexpected. But if you have had any of those things and you're worried about developing SIBO in the future, there are things that you can do to prevent that, like if you've had antibiotics, take probiotics.
Mm.
If you've had to have a short course of PPIs, then there are things you can do to support your stomach acid following that as it's been depleted.
I always recommend our digestive enzyme tablets
Yeah,
to anyone who's taking PPIs, and there are lots of people who are taking
there
PPIs
are.
long term, and that
Yeah,
really maybe don't need to. That's a
yeah,
subject for another day.
yes.
So, oh,
Sorry, I think you asked about testing as well, but
oh yes.
um, basically it's a breath test. So if you
Mm,
go to the GP, they'll probably look at you gone out. They don't really understand
yes.
SIBO. They're not really trained in it. They will maybe, hopefully, refer you on to a gastroenterologist who will understand SIBO more. And only
Mm,
there would you get the breath test, or you can do one privately if you pay. Um,
mm,
so that's how you get diagnosed with SIBO. It's you have to drink a solution of either glucose or lactulose, and then you do the breath test, and it's basically measuring the levels of gases being produced, including
mm,
methane and hydrogen, and then you get a graph and readings to tell you, and it can tell you how severe the overgrowth is as to how high the gases are, etc.
mm. So the symptoms can be different, can't they, Sophia, depending
Yeah,
upon whether it's methane or hydrogen dominant SIBO. And isn't there a third one as well?
there is this hydrogen sulfide.
That's right. Yes.
There's
Yes.
only they only test for that in the US at the moment, which is annoying. There are certain clues you can get from the breath test that I currently do, but it only actually officially checks hydrogen and methane. Um, but if you get a completely flatlining result on your test, which shouldn't happen, there should be a natural rise of hydrogen when the solution reaches your large intestine, because there's natural hydrogen fermentation that goes on in there. If
Yes.
that's completely flatline the whole way, like zeros or ones the whole way through, then there's alarm bells as to hydrogen sulfide. But it's not the actual hydrogen sulfide test that's available in America, which,
Okay.
yeah, so there is a third type.
So can you just explain to people then what symptoms they may get, whether they're methane, hydrogen, or hydrogen sulfate? Did you say
Hydrogen sulfide, yeah.
hydrogen sulfide dominant SIBO?
Yeah, so the methane SIBO tends to slow everything down. So what we find in methane cases is a lot of methanogenic bacteria, and what they do is slow down the transit time.
Mm.
So make everything very sluggish. People tend to have constipation when they come with methane SIBO, very stubborn constipation, sorry, with methane SIBO.
Mm.
Um, if you've got hydrogen, you can have a mix of the both of constipation and diarrhea. Diarrhea.
Mhm.
Um, but hydrogen sulfide is usually mainly the diarrhea. So it's sort of between the two, the symptoms can overlap with the hydrogen, but the methane and hydrogen sulfide are quite specific in terms of constipation or diarrhea.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, the hydrogen tends to move things through quite quickly. So quickly after a meal, someone quite might experience diarrhea quite quickly.
Yes.
So yeah, there's those different types of symptoms in terms of gut
Mm.
symptoms, but most of them always present with an element of bloating, because there's so much gas that's produced when you
Mm.
eat. The
Mhm.
small intestine has got so much fermentation going on in there because of the bacteria in there fermenting the food you eat. So there's often gas production and bloating with all three types of SIBO.
Yes, and
Yeah.
of course, anyone who develops these symptoms, I mean, it is important for them to go and see their GP
Yeah.
and to get properly checked out. But I'm just thinking, when would a GP kind of know that it may be SIBO?
I've never really heard of anybody's GP, and especially not mine or any of my clients, where the GP has mentioned SIBO. It's that the patient or the client has mentioned it to them, and then they've said, oh, not really my realm, I'll refer you on to a gastroenterologist. But that's the problem. If the patient doesn't know about it, then they're just going to go away with, you've got IBS, and then we're not going to get any more testing done. We're not going to get to the root of it.
Yes. Just
So
take
I
these
don't know if,
depending upon what symptoms they're displaying. Yes.
yeah.
We've got a question here. Just bear with me a moment. Where is it? Oh yeah, comment. Just a sec. So Becky, hi there, Becky. Nice to have you with us. So Becky tested positive for hydrogen SIBO after having gut issues for 26 years. Is it possible to feel better through diet alone? I'm not too keen to try rifaximin, and we'll talk about that in a moment, Sophie, or antimicrobials, as I can't afford to feel worse than I do already, as I care for my mum. Okay,
Right.
so right, what do you think of that then, Sophia? 26
there
years,
is.
goodness.
Oh gosh, you must be relieved to finally know what it is. That's a good start. It
And I
depends
just
on the
wonder,
degree.
Becky, what do you think caused your gut issues? Because I'm just looking at your profile photograph, and you don't look very old to me. So maybe you've had gut issues like Sophia. Maybe they started when you were quite young. I'd just be interested to know, really. Sorry, Sophia.
I was just going to say, it depends on the degree of the SIBO. If it's an extreme case, often antimicrobials or an antibiotic is needed. In my clinic, I go first for antimicrobials before going to an antibiotic. Purely because
Can you just explain what rifaximin is, please, Sophia?
Yeah, I will. So rifaximin is an antibiotic. It is one of the better antibiotics, actually, because it doesn't have such a systemic effect on the whole of the gut. It's more locally acting in the small intestine, which is why it's quite good for SIBO. But the problem is that the doctors don't readily prescribe rifaximin. If you get to the gastroenterologist, maybe, but definitely not. A standard GP won't give you rifaximin, or very rarely anyway. They'll give
I
you
heard it's quite expensive, rifaximin. Do you know?
It is. If you do want to get a prescription of it and you go for the gastroenterologist, you can get your hands on it. It's about £200-300 for a 2-week course. Really? So either antibiotics, or it is, considering a normal prescription of antibiotics is what, about, I haven't had any for years, but it used to be about £7-8. So that is quite a jump up. So either way, antibiotics, the correct SIBO antibiotics or antimicrobials, are going to cost money. But yeah, I know what you're saying, because there is going to be an element of sort of a die-off reaction where you're killing off that bacteria, and you will feel worse for a bit, just for a short period, because your body's dealing with a lot of, toxins as the bacteria die off. There
are measures you can take, aren't there, Sophia? To help reduce the die-off reactions.
Absolutely, there are. There's lots of things you can do to support your detoxification pathways and elimination pathways, to minimize die-off. So not everybody experiences horrific die-off at all, particularly if you do support the liver and the elimination pathways, and you're not constipated, and you take on board all of those other things, drinking plenty of water, for example, while you're doing it. Not everyone gets it, so it might be worth giving the rifaximin a shot if you're saying that you've got it there already. But yeah, things like, depending on medications that you're on, like Linda's milk thistle, that's a great one to take alongside a antimicrobial protocol, because it supports the liver in doing its job in detoxifying, can reduce die-off.
When you say an antimicrobial protocol, Sophia, what do you mean exactly?
So it's like
garlic, oregano.
Yeah, those kind of things. You have to be a bit careful specific types of garlic when you're dealing with SIBO because it's high FODMAP, so it can aggravate
Yes.
some people.
Mm.
However, if you just get the allicin extract, not the whole garlic, then it's works really well for SIBO actually. But yeah, oregano, berberine, those kind of things work really well in terms of killing off the bacteria, like basically the same as an antibiotic would. The natural protocols just take a bit longer to complete than an antibiotic protocol. So
Yes, I'd say as well, you know, if Becky, if you are going to consider trying rifaximin or even antimicrobials or both, then do consider having colon hydrotherapy treatment before and then afterwards, just to encourage that migrator motor complex. I mean, I know you've said that you've got hydrogen dominant SIBO, so maybe you don't suffer with a sluggish, constipated bowel. But a colon hydrotherapist would use warm water, be a very gentle treatment, and she would also put some calming herbs in during the colonic as well, you know, to calm your bowel down. So that's definitely worth considering. And lots of rest as well. Lots of
yeah,
rest. I know
definitely.
when I was at Viva May, you know, for those 2 weeks recently, and I was really detoxing there. I mean, I didn't get any serious die-off symptoms, but you know, I was able to. I was drinking loads of. I was drinking water all the time, but I was taking supplements. I was taking alkalizing powders. I was having IV infusions, and I was able to get lots of rest because I wasn't at work. You know, so it does help, doesn't it? But
It does.
what about the food side? Actually, we're going to come on to that later. About
Yeah, we are.
regarding what not to eat and you know what you can eat. Thanks very much for that question, Becky. Now, where did we get to? I think we covered this, didn't we, Sophia? The causes.
Yeah.
And the causes are the same as those for IBS. We've covered that, haven't we?
Yes, pretty much. What I just really quickly add to Becky as well, just because I think it's really important to mention for anyone else who's listening, is that we'll sort of mention it later anyway, but just killing off the bacteria is not actually enough alone. A diet isn't enough alone. Killing off bacteria isn't enough alone. The root cause is your answer to SIBO-free life, because until you find that root cause and deal with that it's going to come back, because that's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And taking antibiotics isn't actually dealing with the root cause. The root cause might be a damaged migrating motor complex or low stomach acid or high stress, not the bacteria itself. That's just a byproduct of the disorder.
That's just a
It's
symptom,
not
isn't
the
it?
it is it's not just it's not the root of it. So yes, get rid of the bacteria, take the rifaximin, but then the work has to be done on healing the root cause.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yes, and so SIBO is sometimes misdiagnosed as IBS by doctors, as we know. Why can't they get the correct diagnosis?
It's so frustrating, but I genuinely just think it's just they just don't understand it, or they
Don't
must have
know.
not had the training in it, or I
Mm,
don't know. But you know, some people are met with just a face of just like, if people go to the doctor and mention SIBO, it's just like there's just not that much understanding of it. They know about IBS, and until you do go to a gastroenterologist, you're not really getting the information that you need to from the GP. But I don't know why. It's like, why has this information not trickled down yet? It's a bit
mm.
bizarre, really. So
So
yeah.
you know the tests the stool tests that GPs do then for their patients who display these symptoms. The stool test wouldn't give them any indication that there was an overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria in the small intestine.
No,
No.
absolutely not. It needs to be done by the breath test. And they don't, unless they are doing a test for H. pylori, then that's the only sort of breath test they offer, which doesn't check for SIBO anyway. So no, it's very commonly missed at the GP actually. unless you already suspect it and you go in there mentioning SIBO and then they refer you on. It can, they're not going to be the ones to be mentioning SIBO in my experience.
Okay,
The
but they may want to do kind of different tests first. They may want to rule out other things first. So it can be a long drawn out process, can't it?
It really can, and it is good to rule those other things out, absolutely. But then at the end of it, it's not very nice to be told that you've got something that maybe it isn't actually IBS, maybe it's SIBO, maybe you can actually heal your SIBO actually, and you don't have to live like that.
Yes, I mean, how many people have been told, you've got IBS and you've got to learn to live with it. Yeah,
lots of people.
So back to the conventional treatments then for SIBO. So really, it's just rifaximin, is it?
Yeah, you don't even always get rifaximin offered to you. Sometimes you just get a generic antibiotic, which isn't local to the small intestine. It's just a systemic one. So it can do a lot more damage than good. And then you're often sent off on your merry way. There's no mention of a root cause. As we know, GPs aren't interested in root cause. It's just, here's the symptom. Let's take this for this symptom. And then you go on your way. But then the problem is that's where it gets this reputation of having a high reoccurrence rate, because the root cause was never addressed. So the terrain is the same. This grows back because if you've got low stomach acid, you don't fix it, then the bacteria is going to keep going through. Or if the migrating motor complex is damaged and you don't fix it, you're going to keep getting it back. So yeah, that's the standard approach for the GP or the gastro, is antibiotics, and that's it, really.
Well, when they take rifaximin, they may get some relief from their symptoms, but temporarily.
Yeah, they probably would. But then it might very likely come back. Some of them will offer, but it's not like a standard thing. Some of them will offer a medical prokinetic after the treatment, which is
what
good.
Does that do then, Sophia? What's that?
A prokinetic helps to stimulate that migrating motor complex to help it to clean the area. But that's quite rare that I've seen people be prescribed that drug afterwards. And often it's not actually because of SIBO, it's because they just have constipation and they use it to try and get things going. But there are natural prokinetics that I use that aren't pharmaceutical, because they don't have nasty side effects. But I usually recommend that someone takes that for at least 6 months post SIBO treatment to get the migrating motor complex working again.
I just wonder, when someone goes to the GP with symptoms like this, persistent symptoms, if the GP looks at the bigger picture, certainly in terms of if that patient is taking a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, if they've been taking it for a long period of time, because we know that there's a connection between long-term regular use of PPIs and an increased risk of gut infections. We know that, don't we? That's been in particular Clostridium difficile. And I just wonder, I mean, I know GPs, they're very busy, they've only got about 6-7 minutes to spend with each patient, so it can't be easy for them.
No,
they don't have the time to look at the bigger picture, let's be fair, whereas nutritional therapists, naturopaths, they do have
they give you time, they listen, they care about the whole story. In fact, they probably ask you too much. They go back to your childhood, they're looking at timeline of events to put everything together. So it's a very different experience. People often feel very heard when they go to a nutritional therapist, because they've never had time before to really go into it all and properly tell the story.
And of course that does take time, doesn't it? It takes your time, it takes my time. I mean, I often, when I'm sort of digging, it's a bit like being a detective, isn't it? I go back to even before they were born. I want to know, the status of their mother's health when she was pregnant. Did she have antibiotics? Did she have antibiotics when she was breastfeeding? It's there's such a lot of information that you need to collate, to put together, to arrive at a correct diagnosis of what what the triggers were in the first place, what the causes were.
100%. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right, let's have a look. What have we got next? Ah, yes. What natural treatments are available for SIBO? Are the protocols long, expensive, and do they require commitment?
Yeah. So the natural treatments, the protocols, I mean, it depends what you think long is. Like, for example, Becky, who said she struggled for 26 years, that's long.
That's long.
So if you're then going to say, I'm going to do a protocol for 6 weeks, well, that's probably not really that long compared to the amount of time you've suffered with it. And unfortunately, you can't expect to take one tablet and be fixed from all your years worth of issues. So yes, some things take a lot of unraveling to start with, to get to the bottom of it. And then the protocols aren't going to be an overnight fix. They are going to take dedication. They are going to take some, investment in terms of money and in terms of your time to complete them. So yes, you are going to have to invest those things into, your health. But I think in terms of, you're going to feel a lot better at the end of it. You're not going to have to live with these debilitating symptoms. Hopefully it's worthwhile doing. But I think if we're thinking about SIBO specifically, then it kind of depends on the test result for me. I'm looking at how bad the overgrowth might be. So if someone's got quite a mild case, we'll do less time on antimicrobials, for example. If someone's got a really high levels of, say, methane, then we'll have to do maybe a couple of rounds of the therapy. Methane is actually renowned for being much more stubborn to treat. So that's another indication. So again, this is why individualized nutrition is so key, because what might work for somebody who's got low levels of hydrogen SIBO, quite easy to fix. If someone's got huge overgrowth of methane SIBO, then that's going to take longer. So again, that's why each protocol is different for each client, for me anyway.
But after about 6 weeks, Sophia, you would be, as a client, you would be wanting to see some improvement in symptoms.
Yes, definitely. Although the first part, if you're in a kill-off protocol, often you might actually feel a bit worse, like Becky had said, but not all. But I always do give that warning to people, like, you might not feel amazing for this first part, but after that, that's when we then see the improvements. So it can be a bit of a rocky start in terms of symptoms to start with. When you're killing off bacteria, it can sort of provoke a lot of other symptoms and make you feel a bit, worse. But that's just, like I said before, the nature of the beast, and it means it's working.
I think if people are aware of that from the get-go, then they can be prepared for it. And I'm sure, you give them advice on what they can do to minimise the die-off.
I do.
But it's just, I'm sorry, it's just something that you have to go through, isn't it?
It is, definitely. But the natural treatments, so it would definitely involve an element of diet, it would involve an element of supplementation, and it also involves quite a heavy side of lifestyle support as well. So stress has a massive impact on gut health, SIBO. So I always send my clients off with a lifestyle plan as well, which supports stress management and how can we get our bodies into rest and digest state rather than fight or flight. How can we get that stomach acid working optimally? Well, stress reduction is absolutely key. So there's a lot of stuff like that goes into it. So practicing, say, meditation or yoga, it doesn't have to be that, but we work together to see what works for you and what you're happy to take on.
And just getting out of your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go for a walk. It doesn't matter what the weather is. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing, isn't there?
I love that saying. So true.
Just get out there and get out of your head. Becky's come back to us. Becky.
Oh, yeah.
That's an old. I'm 51 now. Well, Becky, you look about 25 in that photo.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Diagnosed with endometriosis. I think that may be a cause. So her gastro. Thank you for all this, Becky. It's really useful and it helps other people, of course. My gastro's prescribed me rifaximin. I'm lucky, I know. It's sitting in the cupboard. I really should try it, but worried it will give me bad diarrhea. Well,
yeah.
If it does, Becky, it does. Take the rifaximin at the weekend.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, you just have to give it a go. But
Yeah.
be aware, of course, what Sophia said, that the rifaximin is only going to kill the bacteria. And if you don't take other measures, that bacteria will try to grow back. I'm right, aren't I, Sophia?
You are, yeah. And endometriosis is one of the risk factors for developing SIBO.
Is it?
So
Is
it
it?
is, yeah. It's on the list of root causes for SIBO.
So,
So
so you get endometriosis, then you may develop SIBO, not the other way around.
yeah. So the sort of lesions and things that are usually found in people with endometriosis, those lesions aren't just contained to the uterine lining. It also can go to the bowel and the small intestine, and those lesions are what can impact the migrating motor complex.
Of course, yeah.
So it's like you've had an abdominal surgery in a way, because it's affected those nerve cells. So you've probably got one of your root causes, and that's another thing to mention, is that you might have multiple root causes. So you might have endometriosis, but you might also have had loads of antibiotics, and you might also have high stress. So there might be a few things to work through there.
And diet as well,
Diet, yeah, of
Yes,
course.
yes. So conventional treatments often fail. Why is this? Well, we've covered that because rifaximin, that is the conventional treatment, the antibiotic that you may get if you're lucky. But of course, rifaximin just kills the bacteria, and it will be inclined to grow back and multiply in the small intestine if you don't take other measures to find the root cause of your SIBO.
Yeah, that's it.
Right, so onto diet then. So where does diet come into the successful treatment of SIBO?
I think that it's, again, very, very individualized. So what one person comes to me with, so I always make people fill in a food diary, and I see all sorts of varying food diaries. So the changes that I ask of people do vary quite a bit from client to client, depending on the client. So if I have a client who has got a history of eating disorders, for example, I'm not going to put them on a really restrictive diet. There are some really restrictive diets out there for SIBO. So there's the biphasic diet, there's the low FODMAP diet. What I tend to try and get done first is not just a SIBO test, but a functional stool test that looks at the microbiome. So if somebody's got a really depleted microbiome in terms of bifidobacterium is non-existent, lactobacillus is non-existent, all the other commensal bacteria are really low, I also don't put people on a really restrictive diet, because actually it can make their large gut microbiome worse and worsen the dysbiosis, because it's taking out all the fermentable fibers in the diet. And in doing so, that starves away the beneficial bacteria. So if you are going to be on a low FODMAP diet or a biphasic diet, good, and they are very effective, but you only want to be on them very short term, sort of 6 weeks maximum, and you do need to work with a healthcare professional to do so, like a nutritionist, because you need a proper plan in terms of reintroduction of those foods, and how to do it safely and properly.
You need that support, that ongoing support.
You do, really, because I think you can get very lost in it, and a lot of people, they go on it and then they're so terrified to come off it that they end up having this really restrictive diet for so long. And that actually, because of what it does to the large microbiome, yes, it might starve the bacteria in the small intestine, but it's also starving the bacteria in the large intestine that you need to help you to digest your fibers in your foods. So when you go back on eating those fibers, if you've starved your good bacteria, bifido, a prime example, helps to digest a lot of the fibers we eat, and you don't have any bifido, then you're going to struggle with bloating and gas because you can't digest those fibers. So it's sort of a vicious cycle. So you have to be quite careful with these restrictive diets. But yes, there are different diets out there, and they can be used well if you do them, under guidance. But definitely looking at taking out, for example, ultra processed foods is a definite must, and excess sugars in the diet and artificial sweeteners wreak havoc on the gut as well. So there's some sort of things that definitely needs to be taken out. Any sort of pathogenic bacteria in the gut does love sugar and helps it to grow, so that one needs to be definitely minimized.
So would you tell them to restrict fruit as well?
No, not really. I don't like to tell people to take all the fruits out. There are certain fruits on the low FODMAP diet, for example, that are higher in FODMAP, so they may aggravate people. However, I don't like to take such a military approach where it's like you can't have any fruit or any sugar. But knowing which fruits to pick that are lower in sugar, for example, like berries, for example, are much lower in sugar. So I always like to keep those in. You might want to avoid really high sugary fruits eaten on their own, but paired with protein rich foods, for example, they're not going to have such a spike on the glucose levels. So again, this is where
Can you give
it's,
some examples, Sophie, of high sugar fruits?
yeah, so things like bananas, well, more ripe bananas, green bananas are actually lower in sugar. Dried fruits are obviously really high in sugar. Mango, pineapple, those like very sweet and they are delicious. Those are sort of higher sugar fruits. But lower sugar fruits like citrus fruits, berries, they can be implemented without having such an effect on blood sugar
Okay,
levels.
okay. So what about dairy? What about the lactose in dairy? Would you still recommend it, but recommend that they go lactose free?
I think if people don't have an issue with dairy, I don't automatically take it out. If they've got SIBO, then there are restrictions on dairy in terms of like low FODMAP and the biphasic diet. If we're going down that route, but like I said, I don't use that in every single person that comes to me because of the individual. But yeah, it just sort of depends on the person. But there's often types of dairy that you can keep in. So there's definitely more low FODMAP and biphasic friendly like cheeses and stuff like Parmesan is one of the ones
Yes.
that's actually naturally low in lactose anyway.
What
So that one can
goat's
be used.
cheese, sheep's cheese
Yeah,
as
those
well?
are definitely better as well for supporting that, and not just what you eat, but also when you eat it. So just
Yes.
quickly on the migrating motor complex. So actually what it does is it cleans your small intestine in between meals, but it only resets after around 90 minutes. So if you're someone who's constantly grazing and picking here and there, and you never give your digestive system its time to clean itself out thoroughly, and every time you eat, it's like, oh, another 90 minutes, another 90 minutes, and it delays it all day. So meal spacing and leaving enough time between meals is actually really, really effective when it
Very
comes to
important.
SIBO. Let your body do what it can naturally do. If you give it the right chance, then it can do that cleaning, but you need to leave at least 3 to 4 hours really between meals for it to work
Well,
properly.
that's exactly what the doctors said at the Viva May Clinic. 4 hours. You need to leave
Yeah.
4 hours between your meals.
And that's all well and good, but you need to make sure what you're eating is very protein rich to
Yeah,
keep you
keep you
full
full.
between. Yeah, otherwise you're going to be like, really craving something to fill you up in between.
What about then, Sophia, on the subject of food still, fermented foods for people who have SIBO? Do they have to avoid them?
Generally, yes,
Mm.
until they've got rid of the bacteria, because a lot of people who have SIBO react quite badly to fermented foods because it's adding more fermentation,
Mm.
more of that. But yes, you hear in gut health professionals that fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut is great, and it is. But
Mm.
again, this is also where personalized nutrition is so important because it's not great for everyone. There are
Well,
going to be
people might
people
be
who,
thinking, "Oh, these are really healthy foods. I'm going to eat these because they're good for my gut." But they may not
yeah.
be good. Well, not just if they have SIBO, but for IBS as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say you can't ever eat them, but once you've got the SIBO under control, then you'll be able to increment them into the diet slowly and build them up, and then they will be beneficial. But if you're adding a load more bacteria into a already overgrown bacteria state, it doesn't always go down that well.
No,
So
no.
yeah.
Oh, Becky. Thank you so much. I've made lots of notes and we'll start a plan of action. I think
Oh, good.
okay. Do contact Sophia Beckett. She's absolutely brilliant, and she's got the T-shirt.
I've
So
been through it all, yeah.
well, you've been through it all. It's not just that you've got your degree and you've got your diploma, Sophia. You've kind of lived it, haven't you?
I have. Yeah, I've done all the tests. I know how it all goes. So yes, do feel
Can
free
I
to
just
reach
ask you
out.
something about testing, Sophia? Sorry, because we have the GI effects test, we have the comprehensive digestive um, stool
Stool.
analysis test
Yeah.
with parasitology. Are these different tests for different conditions, or are they just different labs and the names of the tests that these labs do? That they
Basically
do
the
that they test
latter.
for the same things.
There or thereabouts. I mean, some labs have additional markers, some include, like, say, zonulin, which is a leaky gut marker, some don't. So I like to go for the one that does because I like to look at
Yes,
zonulin.
yes.
Some test for a bigger range of commensal bacteria, so that's like your good microbiome bacteria. Um, and some like include various other bits and bobs, and some don't. But yeah, they're all looking at the gut microbiome. Some are
Mm-hmm.
also looking at digestive enzyme status as well, bile
Mm-hmm.
acids. So also looking at digestion markers as well as the microbiome. So they are fantastic tests, and you can get so much knowledge from those tests that can really help to underpin your sort of plan going forward. Because
Mm-hmm.
if someone's got a really depleted microbiome, I don't go straight in with antimicrobials because there's nothing there, and it's, there might be a parasite, but you need to build someone up first before you deal with a parasite, for example, because knocking someone down when they're already depleted, it doesn't end well. So again, the testing can really help to sort of personalize, but also speed up your progress, really, because you've got all the information you need and you've got the best steps forward then.
I'm just thinking about parasites again, going back to people who take PPIs long term.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them do have, not just pathogenic bacteria, but parasites as well. Because the
yeah.
stomach acid, it's got it carries out lots of functions, doesn't it? Including nuking any pathogens before they can get into the gut.
Yeah, exactly. And if you haven't got SIBO, but you still think you've got IBS, it might not be SIBO. It might be something else that's going on, like a parasite. That can
Mm,
cause all sorts of IBS symptoms. Once you get rid of the parasite, you find that you don't have IBS anymore. So it might not always be SIBO, but it could be something that's found on a functional microbiome test. Like, again, if you've got a really depleted microbiome, you've got no beneficial bacteria, that can also mimic what IBS or SIBO look
mm,
like. Like, you can get bloating and gas, constipation, diarrhea from it. So if it's not SIBO, it could be something else that's also fixable.
mm.
And those tests, that other test that you just mentioned, can help to get to the bottom of that as well.
You see, people, they just can't do this by themselves, can they? So
No,
they need expert help, don't they?
I
To
would say
navigate
so.
through all the what's needed. Because if they try, I'm just thinking, if they try to do it themselves, they might be wasting their money. And if someone wants to go to a lab for a specific stool test to check for,
Yeah,
like a comprehensive digestive stool analysis or a GI effects one, don't they have to do it through a registered practitioner?
yes.
You can't just go to the lab and say, send me
I
a
want a
kit. I
test.
want I want to send a stool sample in, because the lab won't. They can't do it, can they?
No.
They have to work with a qualified person.
Yeah, because basically it's seen as a bit unethical to be given a load of test result information
Mm.
that
Oh,
someone can't
I
see.
lost you there for
So
a bit.
you
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that it needs someone to be able to interpret them for you because the reports are quite complex.
Yeah,
So you need someone who can actually tell you what it means.
yeah,
Because if
of
you got
course.
one without a practitioner, you wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. It would just be useless to the person. You can't really make
Yeah.
sense of it unless you know what you're looking for.
Oh yes, I've seen some of those A4 printed sheets from the lab,
Yeah.
and I think,
Like,
am I dyslexic?
no, it's yeah, they are complex things,
They're
definitely.
very complex. They're very scientific. A lot of the language they use is it's scientific language, isn't it? The terminology. So you definitely need to
Absolutely.
work with an
Yeah,
expert.
I would
So
say
I think
so.
we've come to the end of today's live video, Sophie. So have you got anything that you would like to add regarding IBS or SIBO?
I just think that don't give up hope, really. If you're
Yeah.
struggling out there, then there is absolutely hope for you. It doesn't mean it has to be a lifelong sentence that you are, stuck with forever. You can find answers. They might not be free from the GP, but the investment to find out those answers, maybe doing some testing or working with a practitioner,
Mm,
is, I would say, 100% worth every penny, because you can be free from those symptoms.
mm,
But it just takes a bit more of a deep dive in, not the standard 6-minute appointment with the GP.
mm.
And yeah, someone who will actually listen to you and get to the bottom of things for you.
And I just say, what price is health as well?
100%. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I know you, you're like me, Sophia. And I've foregone holidays,
I
a
know.
new car. I've
Yeah.
foregone lots of things to help improve and maintain my health through going, well, for example, to the Viva May clinic in Austria for 2 weeks. If anybody checks how much it is to go to that clinic, they'll see. But that's, for me, that's an investment,
Yeah.
and I work hard, and
Yeah.
that's where I like to spend my money, on my health,
Yeah.
because I've got a granddaughter, and I've got another on the way.
So exciting.
And being an older grandmother, I want to be around as long as possible for my family, and certainly for my grandchildren, and that means
100%.
taking care of my health.
Yeah, and I think, like, I always use this with my clients, and I say we don't think twice about, we service our cars, we spend, hundreds of pounds on getting a new tire or an MOT and all these things, but we need the same for our bodies. We need a,
Mm,
a yearly check, or we need to put some money into checking, our microbiome, or putting that into our health, not just
mm,
our car.
mm. Or not having that new kitchen or that new bathroom.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. I mean, and it's not easy, is it? I'm not saying to people where, I'm not telling them where they should spend and invest their money. Of course, I'm not. It's not easy. I know that times
Yeah,
are hard
yeah,
at the moment, certainly for many people. But
yeah.
there are, there are. They don't have to do the full protocol, do they? So if they contact you, for example, Sophia, if they can't afford to do the full protocol, I'm sure you can help them, with diet.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's always something we can do.
always
It doesn't
something they
always
can
have to
do.
be the, full singing, dancing, all the tests, all the, expensive things. It can be quite simple sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's really quite easy, some of the things, the tweaks. If I look at a food diary, I'm like, okay, if we do these simple tweaks here, let's start with this. And then if we need the testing afterwards, because it can be quite simple dietary changes, that is
yeah,
all that's needed.
yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. So, just before we
Thank
go,
you.
if people want to contact you, Sophia, how do they do that?
You can send me an email, or you can go on my website and use the contact page. So my email is hello@sophiahillnutrition.com. My
Mhm.
website is sophiahillnutrition.com. My Instagram is also Sophia Hill Nutrition. So any of those, but email is usually the best way to get hold of me.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much for that, Sophia.
Thank you for having
And
me.
and everyone, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you got something. Just going to get rid of that. Yeah, okay. I hope you got something from that. As I said at the beginning, this video will remain on the Just for Tummies Facebook page, and we will be sending it out in a newsletter within the next 7 to 10 days. If you don't get our newsletters, go onto the website and sign up to receive them. So thank you so much again, Sophia.
Thank
And
you.
I think our next live video,
I think it was June now, was
June.
it?
Yes, was it
Or
June?
was it July?
It's July.
July. Yeah,
because we've both got quite a busy month in June.
June, that was it. And then May is...
We did want to talk about the oral microbiome in June and the impact that can have on the whole body. But I think we're going to we maybe have to do that another time. Thank you so much then, everyone.
Thank
And Sophia,
you.
if you just stay at the end and we'll have a quick chat,
Yes,
a quick
sure.
debrief. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Then bye-bye for now.
Bye.